Hello and welcome to the Action Network podcast UFC betting preview for UFC 310. I'm Sean Zerillo, joined today by Billy Ward. We're here to break down this 14-fight card, give you our best bets, and we're going to start things off with the main event between Alexander Pantoja, about minus 265 consensus odds, and Kai Asakura at plus 215. Asakura making his UFC debut, the former risen bantamweight champion, two-time bantamweight champion, moving back down to 125 pounds for the first time in 7 years and making his promotional debut in a title fight. The last fighter in that position, I believe, was Gilbert Melendez in 2013 when he fought for the UFC lightweight title, came over from Strikeforce as the champion. So very rare that the UFC signs somebody from outside of the promotion and grants them an immediate title shot, but the pool of talent is relatively thin at flyweight, and also Pantoja has taken out the majority of contenders within his own division, either as the champion or prior to on his run up the title rankings. But in terms of this fight, one I would probably not bet, one Billy may probably not bet unless we had to give out the content for these purposes. I actually lean ultimately on the over. That probably is going to shock Billy considering we were discussing this last night. And we both said we like the under, do not like the price. And the reason I don't like the price is because I think the price on the over is pretty decent, actually. Now, I would rather play the over 2.5 rounds to be very clear as opposed to the fight to go to a decision. I project value on the fight to go to a decision. I'm really concerned or / need more information on Asakura's gas tank. 1, cutting to 125 pounds for the first time in 7 years. 2, traveling. 3, he's never seen the championship rounds in his career. And Pantoja typically tires the longer his fights go. You see him fighting through that exhaustion. There's a chance he's the fresher fighter here in the 4th and 5th rounds if the weight cut, if the travel, if the championship rounds for the first time have an impact on Asakura. If Asakura has to defend grappling, may tire him out just a little bit more. But this is a relatively binary fight as well, because I do view him as the much better striker, and compared to Pantoja's 3 most recent opponents, all of those wins, he's going to throw a little bit more kicks and knees into the mix as well. Urseg, Moreno, blanking on Pantoja's third opponent, but they were, Urseg, Moreno,
Royval.
Go ahead, Billy.
Brandon Royval.
Royval, thank you.
Both
all
Brandon.
of them try to box him, not throwing in as many kicks, not mixing it up as much. So standing in the pocket in places where Pantoja can take them down, maybe Asakura a little bit more on the outside, fighting the distance game a little bit more, landing the strikes from range. That said, we don't have any information on, as I said, the cardio, the championship rounds, on top of how his cage wrestling looks too. He's switching from a boxing ring with ropes to a walled octagon. It may just change the style of wrestling, may change how Pantoja is able to get in on his takedowns, finish them, and whether he's able to control Asakura for extended stretches. Asakura's scrambling ability may be the determinative skill in this fight, because Pantoja gets the back against virtually every fighter. He gets virtually every fighter to the ground at some point. Brandon Royval, happy to accept those positions, to stay there for extended stretches. I think Asakura got to be more willing to scramble, but does he end up giving the back and getting choked out as a result of that? So the last thing I want to mention, Asakura, very dangerous striker. Pantoja seems to get hurt in every fight, but has never been finished in his career. He fights through exhaustion at the end of fights. He fights through getting hurt. He has great recoverability. I don't know about his durability because he's getting hurt in every fight now, but his recoverability is elite. So I expect this fight to finish nearly 60% of the time. The divisional average is about 43% decisions in the last 4 years. The betting market, though, is at about 33%. They're giving you plus 200 on this fight to reach a decision. I think it's closer to 40%, still below the divisional average. I would make their respective decision lines about plus 250 for Pantoja and 8-1 for Asakura. So I'm fine betting either fighter to win by decision. I would probably lean Pantoja by decision if you're betting those two, the over 2.5 rounds. I'm not super interested in any of those bets, though. And just blindly, I think there's probably value on Asakura round 1 KO. The chance that he comes out, hurts Pantoja, finishes him. It's sort of been trending that direction, that somebody is going to eventually do it to Pantoja. And I think Asakura absolutely has the skill set to get that done. Billy, I know you like the underdog in this spot. We've also seen an adjustment in the point spread markets on these 5-round fights, typically the point spreads were 5.5 points. We're getting 9.5 on both underdogs in the 5-round fights this week. The main event, the co-main event, which we'll talk about in a moment. You're taking Asakura on the money line. You also like the plus 9.5 points, though, at plus 105. And then any other ways you're thinking about betting this fight. Also curious how you think Asakura's cardio is going to hold up in the 4th and 5th rounds if it gets there.
Yeah, before I talk about the logic on the bet specifically, I share some of your concerns. I do worry about the cardio because Ryzen or Risen, you seem to be taking a stance. There's been a lot of debate on the name of that promotion this week, but they do 3-round title fights, right? So he hasn't had to go the full 5 rounds, even when he has gone 15 minutes. With that said, usually we think the striker probably has cardio holds up better because they're not working as hard to get the takedowns over and over the way Pantoja does. So it's not a huge concern, it's a minor concern. I'm not really concerned about the weight cut. We always see guys come over from Japanese promotions into a lower weight class. We saw it with Manel Kopp, who Asakura fought a couple times over there. I don't know if they do the hydration test the way they do in one, or if it's just a cultural thing where they just don't cut as much weight. I don't think that's going to be a problem. We're recording this like 45 minutes before weigh-in, so by the time you're watching this, you'll have that answer. Asakura is a big, long dude. I think he'll be able to keep Pantoja at range at least for a while here. As far as the bet specifically, one of the things I think is that anytime we get someone coming over from outside of the UFC, there's just a little bit of bias in the markets there because a lot of MMA fans and gamblers just they only know the UFC. They don't bet anything else. I believe Yuri Prohaska was an underdog when he came over as Rising champ and fought like somebody not good and just demolished him. This isn't the case here. It's a tough matchup, but I don't think you should be plus 215. So I've got a sprinkle on that. And yeah, as you mentioned, the plus 9.5 on these point spreads for Pantoja or for Asakura to not get that, Pantoja has to pitch a shutout. If it goes to a decision, the only scorecard that gets that as a win for Pantoja is 50-45. Because if you win 49-46 times 3, that's only 9 points. We're getting plus 9.5 on Asakura. If this does go the distance and you're showing a little bit of value there, really hard for me to see Asakura not winning one. Pantoja does tend to tire late. You'll see him take like the 3rd or 4th round almost off as he recovers for that big push down the stretch. Kind of saw it against Urseg. And I do think Asakura is a dangerous striker. The flaw in his game is that he's very willing to be hit as well as give shots. Pantoja's not a big, powerful striker. This is a lighter weight class than Asakura has been fighting in, kinda, as I alluded to. I'm not worried about that power coming back from Pantoja. So Asakura has never been submitted, did judo growing up, very solid grappling base. If Pantoja wins, it's probably a decision because he's holding him down and controlling him on the ground. If Asakura wins, it's probably a knockout or damages him enough to win some rounds clearly. Either way should cover that 9.5 unless he gets submitted, which again, we've never seen before. And that's plus money. So personally, I have a half unit on the plus 9.5 at plus 105, and then a quarter unit on Asakura's money line at plus 215. If those takedowns are coming, if Asakura lands a big shot, but then Pantoja starts grappling, wouldn't hate coming back with Pantoja live at plus money due to that cardio issue we talked about. If we get an opportunity to, I'm not sure that the line will move significantly, though.
Yeah, I might be interested in a live bet on Pantoja if it's 1-1 after 2. And Pantoja's price moves in, it gets closer to a pick'em price. Yuri was an underdog in his UFC debut against Volkan Ozdemir, who's about plus 150, ended up beating Ozdemir. And the official Japanese pronunciation of Ryzen is Raijin. Raijin. So we're going to go with the Japanese pronunciation moving forward. 1, because it's 2 types of alcohol, but 2, because it just sounds much cooler and it's much easier to say and it's much more phonetic. So Raijin is the pronunciation I'm going to take going forward, the official Japanese pronunciation phonetically. Let's move on to our fight of the night. You should have the preview for this fight up on actionnetwork.com. I will have a written preview up for Pantoja and Asakura. Shavkat Rakhmonov minus 400 against Ian Garry at plus 310. This is a number 1 contender fight in the welterweight division. Shavkat has finished all 18 of his professional opponents, and I think he gets a 19th year with Ian Garry on Saturday. Gary's 2 inches taller, but Shavkat has the 3-inch reach advantage, and he also is much more physically strong, in my opinion. We'll see if it plays out that way. I think in a 5-round fight, and I should mention this is a 5-round fight. If you don't realize, 5-round number 1 contender fight, co-main event. I think there's a chance in a 15 or 25-minute kickboxing match, Garry could edge him on points, but that's dependent on Shavkat having zero success grappling, zero success in the clinch, and Garry just getting the same sort of low pace, moderate pace, distance striking fight that he's gotten in his other recent bouts, where Shavkat can get caught in those type of fights when he's striking. He can have close rounds with Garry here, but I think the biggest moments are going to come from Shavkat, and I think any grappling success is likely to come for Shavkat as well. His wrestling isn't great. He needs the clinch to get takedowns. You get the fighter up against the cage, get the takedowns from there, but his top game is elite. And I think at some point he gets Garry down, hurts him with ground and pound, or just hurts Garry on the feet. I think the chin for Garry remains a concern, hurt by Song Kanan. We've seen Shavkat rocked as well, and for that reason, I think the under on this fight, the under 3.5 at -125 is interesting too. I think Garry could absolutely land something, land a head kick, hurt Shavkat with something, but Shavkat inside the distance at -135, and then his knockout prop at +280, I prefer to a submission prop. Submission prop juiced lower. Apparently Shavkat submitted or tapped the Garry in training. Garry's been living in and working in Brazil for extended periods of time now. Charles Oliveira is going to be in his corner. He's training at Oliveira's gym. I'm sure he's refined his submission defense a little bit in the past year and a half while working with Shooto Box. I think it's likelier that Rakhmonov gets the KO if he finishes. You agree you have Shavkat by KO at +280 in our sheet. Any other ways you're thinking of betting this fight, Billy?
Yeah, you mentioned that Shavkat needs the clinch to get takedowns. I think the clinch is what's going to decide this fight. Ian Garry is one of the best long fighters I've seen in a really long time. He manages distance extremely well. That pull counter that he knocks people out with or knocks people down with is beautiful. Head kicks from range, does all that tremendously. But Shavkat has the longer reach here, so that doesn't make it easy for Ian Garry to do what he does best. We've seen him against other longer fighters, like Michael Page in his last fight, and Gary's approach there was to clinch with him and take him down, which is a horrible plan against Shavkat because Shavkat's clinch takedowns are amazing. His striking in the clinch is really impressive as well. His knees and elbows, probably his best offense outside of that crazy spinning hook kick he landed one time. So that makes it tough for me to see the path for Garry just because what he does well is fight shorter people, and he doesn't have that luxury here. 100% agree with you. We've never even seen an official submission attempt recorded against Ian Garry in the UFC. We've seen him knocked down by Song Kanan. We've seen him cracked a couple times by Jeff Neal. I think that's the easier path for Shavkat, and the market is overreacting to the likelihood of a submission just because he has submitted people. Often he hurts those people first before submitting him, right? So there's the chance for a knockout there too. And prior to the UFC, he actually had more knockouts than submissions. He's not an ADCC champion, right? Like he's a guy who wants to beat you up with top pressure. If you give him a submission, he'll take it. But otherwise, he's happy to just wail away and finish you. I think that's more likely against Garry. It's a tremendous price. And then, yeah, there's been so much talk about them training together in the past. He probably tapped him in a round where they were just grappling, right? Like, I'm guessing that was just a rolling round, not a full MMA round that he tapped him in. So, like, that's firmly in the don't care column for me, just because, yeah, it's a lot easier to submit each other when that's all we're trying to do than when we can also hit, stand up, get to range, all those other things. But yeah, I kind of like Shavkat by finish, but -135 is not a great price. I was looking at his finish only market just to see, and it's like -700 or something. Where if it, so the market is saying Garry has a shot at a decision, not much finishing upside. Obviously, you don't play that, but yeah, Shavkat KO is how I'm riding with it. Ironically, I'm more excited about the main event that you wrote up, and you seem more excited about the co-main event that I wrote up, but we both got picks on both of these.
Yeah, I was thinking last night we probably should have switched fights, or at least I would have liked to switch fights and written more about the Shavkat fight. But you know what? Sometimes when you have to deeper dive on the fight that you're not as confident in, you or don't have as good of a read on going in, you end up uncovering something while you're writing about it or while you're thinking about it deeper. And I do feel like when I write up these fights or when I write up baseball games, I do have a better understanding. Putting my own thoughts on paper, you kind of flesh out what's in your mind. And I did kind of arrive on that over for the main event as I was writing it up. It was like, why don't I like the under? It's because the price on the over is good. So why aren't we betting the over here? We're here to bet prices. We're here to bet numbers. We're not here to bet certain fighters. And we'll talk about Cody Durden a little bit later. Let's move on to our favorite underdogs, though. Aljamain Sterling, our consensus underdog here at 2-1. We also discussed last night, plus 3.5 on the point spread at minus 145. Almost seems too good to be true. And then plus 350 by decision for Aljo would be a bet for me as well. Evloev is constantly in close decisions. I didn't take a look at your luck ratings yet for this week, Billy, because I do like to go into my own work blind, but I would assume that Evloev might have been in there considering his recent close decisions. Gets in a lot of splits, does not finish anybody.
Mhm.
Is he the better wrestler in this matchup? Is Aljamain Sterling the better wrestler in this matchup? I think Aljo may be the better wrestler here. And Aljo has great cardio or great output across 15 minutes. Forget a 25-minute fight. This is just a 15-minute fight. Aljo constantly cranks out volume against people. He has basically size parity here. He's going to be able to stand at range and land some kicks, throw some flashy techniques, attempt more strikes in general. And I think the grappling is going to be relatively even. So to me, this fight is close to a toss-up. I've never been particularly high on Evloev in terms of championship status. I bet on him a lot. I bet on him by decision a lot throughout his UFC run. I've never viewed him as a champion. I don't think he has the power. I don't think he has the durability or the heart once he gets up against the highest level guys in these divisions. Aljo is up from 135 to 145 now. This is his second fight at 145. I think he's looking a lot more muscular than he did at 135. I think there's a chance he's just stronger at this weight class, and he's going to be the better fighter in this matchup. He may look like an outright favorite on Saturday. There's not many matchups you can look at with a plus 200 underdog and go, is there a chance this guy is just like the better fighter here? I think there's a chance Aljo is the better fighter here, straight up. We've only seen him lose one time in however many years now, and he was winning that fight against Sean O'Malley. He got caught in the second round, made a mistake. If he was coming into that fight on a full camp, fully rested, maybe it plays out a little bit differently, but was looking like the better minute winner in that fight. Typically is the better minute winner in all of his fights. Billy, I would imagine you agree that there's a chance Aljo may just look like the better fighter, may look like a straight up favorite on Saturday. And then you're also taking a chance on Alexander Volkov at plus 295. The last time him and Ciryl Gane fought, it was a 5-round fight. Volkov was about plus 130. Now he's plus 295 in a 3-round fight where the margins for winning rounds and pulling away are much slimmer for Gane.
Yeah, we've been doing this together long enough that you've actually nailed like pretty much everything I was thinking. I don't know if I believe you that you didn't see the luck ratings, but absolutely had Aljo in there, plus 215. First bet I made of the week, because I put it in an article on Monday, I get to claim the plus 215 while you're stuck with the plus 200. But 100% agree. I'm going to be out with some of my buddies from the jiu-jitsu gym on Saturday watching this. I'm going to ask them who they think recently came up from 135, and I bet most people are going to get it wrong, right? Like if you don't follow this, Aljo's going to look like the bigger fighter. He got more takedowns on Henry Cejudo than Cejudo got on him. Cejudo's a gold medalist Olympic wrestler. I'm not saying Masvidal can't take him down. He might. Don't think he does much with it. Like we've never seen Aljo really controlled on the ground
That's
when
the
he
point.
gets there. He's just as long, probably the better athlete. The ceiling or the floor here for Aljo is he loses 2 out of 3 rounds of kind of boring grappling and then sloppy striking. The ceiling is he wins any of those dimensions. He's much more well-rounded. Absolutely love Aljo here. Love him for DFS. He's super cheap. Love the plus 3.5 at a decent price.
Who's likelier to finish, do you think, of the two?
I think it's got to be Aljo, right? Like, because we've seen him ever finish someone. Right?
He has no knockdowns offensively, but I feel like, if either is winning, it's likely by submission, and I view him as the much better submission grappler. So maybe he gets knocked out by Evloev, but yeah, I think Aljo's submission has to be a favorite over Evloev knockout.
Well, and Evloev's only been credited for submission attempts in one of his 8 UFC fights. Attempts, not success. He's never tapped anyone. So, like, yeah, this is when people complain about boring grapplers, Movsar Evloev is kind of who they're talking about. So,
and keep in mind, this is two top 5 ranked fighters in the division. The UFC buried this fight on the prelims because they hate both guys. They hate the style of both guys, and they hate both guys personally. So this is buried on the prelims. This should easily be the third fight, the featured fight on the card. The UFC is going to put it at 7:30 p.m. because they don't want to hype up either of these guys because they think there's a chance Avoyev just wins a grappling-based decision, but I think there is a lot of grappling. I don't think it's necessarily an exciting fight, but I think we both think there's a chance that Aljo is just the straight-up better grappler. And if he is, how do you not
Yeah.
bet him?
Well, the other reason this is on the prelims is because the UFC does not want to allow Bryce Mitchell, Kron Gracie, or Nate Landwehr to be able to talk on broadcast TV. And we'll talk about those guys later. None of those guys all got to be on pay-per-view in case they get a mic in front of them. But yeah, you summed up my Volkov thoughts pretty cleanly. He was plus 130 into the first one against Gane. Gane won every round, I think, or I think maybe 4-1.
Yeah, 4-1.
There's not all the judges agreed, so it wasn't clear. But none of them were like, wow, he destroyed him. And then Gane's been out like 15 months filming a movie or whatever, and Volkov has looked better. Volkov also used to grapple when he first came into the UFC and looked really good doing it. He hasn't in a while. If he does here and gets a takedown, he'll look like a huge favorite because when you're a, late 30s fighter like Gane, takes all that time off to go film a movie, you've lost, a lot of development in terms of the grappling, which is already something he's behind on coming over as a kickboxer. So, yeah, if Volkov grapples, he's going to look like a favorite. If he doesn't, he's going to look better than plus 295. So that's kind of my logic there. Those are the two underdogs I think, most high on, although we'll talk about a couple more shortly.
Yeah, he choked out Tai Tuivasa. I believe that was after hurting him.
Yeah.
I mean, how does Volkov just not approach this fight completely differently than the first fight? You already tried the distance kickboxing match, which usually works for you against other people because you're taller and longer, but Gane is too quick for you. You already proved that over 5 rounds. He's just too quick for you. He's going to jab you up for 5 rounds. So either grapple or go balls to the wall and just brawl it out and fight in a phone booth and see who falls. I think those are your options here. You can't play distance kickboxing match for 15 minutes. You either have to brawl and see who gets knocked out, or you have to try to grapple at some point. Did you mention the plus 3.5, the point spread for Volkov here? Do you like the point spread?
I don't know. It feels like he's either going to pull away tremendously, and like you said, if he grapples, we don't need the plus 3.5 because he's going to look like a favorite. And if they just brawl, someone gets knocked out, so the point spread doesn't matter. So that's not what I'm huge on. It's certainly, I mean, it makes sense, right? If they do have a boring kickboxing match and Volkov happens to win a round, I get it. I just like the money line much better.
Fair enough. Yeah, Volkov, he's only 36. I mean, heavyweight peak, I guess, at 36. I don't know.
That's
But
28 in heavyweight years, though. You know what I mean?
absolutely.
Like
Yeah, no, he seems, I don't want to say like quicker, but sharper in his recent fight. Like he looked really good in the Pavlovich fight. Since the loss to Aspinall, where Aspinall just ran him over and submitted him immediately, he's actually looked like he's leveled up again, which
yeah.
I don't know if that's possible at his age, but I think Volkov looks really solid. And I think the price adjustment relative to the first fight makes sense considering Gane won the final 4 rounds clean, lost the first round, basically getting leg kicked. But 3-round fight, very thin margins, and Gane off of the long layoff. Sometimes off of a long layoff, there is that cage rush. So Gane comes back, drops round 1, just feeling out his opponent again, not realizing, hey, I'm in a 3-round fight again. I've been fighting only 5-rounders, right? Gane has basically only been scheduled for 5-rounders in his past. Well, I guess he came back and beat Spivak, but that was also a 5-rounder. Yeah, I mean, his past like 4 or 5 fights have all been 5-rounders. And I do feel like there's that mental gap sometimes with guys. Petr Yan, when he went from 5-rounders to fighting Sean O'Malley, buddy, you can't take round 1 off, even though you do it every single time. Well, in a 3-round fight, it's going to cost you. So, yeah, I definitely think dialing back from a 5-rounder to a 3-rounder could be to Gane's detriment, potentially. Let's move on to our top props section. Some interesting ones here. I will mention Kron Gracie off the top because it's not something I'm sure I'm betting, but Kron Gracie at plus 1,200 by submission against Bryce Mitchell. He's won all 5 of his fights that he's won in the UFC by submission. It's basically double his money line price. If you're playing Kron, I don't know how you don't just sprinkle the sub prop. Maybe he wins a volume-based decision. He landed a bunch of strikes against Cub Swanson, but the 2024 version of Kron Gracie, I doubt is outstriking Bryce Mitchell for 15 minutes or not getting out-wrestled by Bryce Mitchell for 15 minutes. But I think there's a chance Bryce Mitchell could stick his head into a guillotine and get himself submitted here against the Gracie. So Kron by submission at plus 1,200. Would not hate it. The props I actually like. There's some other ones that I'll have too. You can find in my full write-up at actionnetwork.com. Randy Brown by decision at 525 against Brian Battle. I also like that fight to go over. And then Nate Landwehr by knockout against Doo-Ho Choi at plus 360. We'll start with Brown. He's the taller and longer fighter. He's also fought higher level of competition. He's more experienced. And he's the better mover in this fight. The problem is that Brian Battle doesn't defend strikes really at all. He's very aggressive. And Randy Brown relies on his movement more so than head movement to defend strikes. And I feel like at some point in every fight, Randy Brown tries to do his little dodge out of the way of a shot, and then he ends up leaning into the shot and getting himself knocked down. You guess wrong once in every fight, you're going to end up getting hurt. So I'm a little worried about Randy Brown getting clipped here just because Brian Battle is very aggressive. He's going to try to fight in a phone booth if they can. Randy Brown going to be trying to move on the outside of the octagon, evading. I think at some point he probably does get hit and hurt, but hopefully that's in one of the 3 rounds and not multiple 3 rounds. Brown by decision at plus 525, and that fight to go over or reach decision, both pretty juicy prices at plus money. And then Nate the Train at plus 360 by KO. Is this still the pay-per-view opener? I believe you had said earlier that Kron Gracie might be opening the pay-per-view, but I think this is actually the pay-per-view opener, right?
Those two are first. I forget. Yeah, Nate Landwehr's first. You're right.
Okay, yeah, Nate the Train opening a pay-per-view. How do you not bet the under? This guy's going to be, I mean, you could put him in a warehouse with nobody there, and this guy will be leaping out of his skin the moment he gets in a cage with a full crowd starting off a UFC pay-per-view. I'm not sure if he's been on a UFC pay-per-view yet. These guys are just going to throw down. Now, Nate is super reckless. He is physically stronger. I think he has a physicality advantage here. I think Choi is the better technical fighter. And as a result, I like Nate to finish, not Choi to finish, because I think Choi's finishing is relying on Nate being overly aggressive, throwing out of his shoes and getting countered, where Nate, I think, has more chances to finish this fight just straight up. Don't love Choi's chin, don't love Choi's cardio, and Nate pushes a crazy pace that tends to break all of his opponents. So Nate by KO, Nate also potentially in round 2 and round 3 at juicier odds, I think are interesting looks as well. You're going with an opposite approach here. You're going to take Choi in round 1 or round 2 and then try to come back on Nate live. I absolutely agree. Nate live is the way to bet it. I'm probably betting Nate KO with round 2 and round 3. And Nate live, you're betting Choi at round 1 or round 2 with Nate live, giving the other side of this fight. And then you've also got a bet on Dominic Reyes and Anthony Smith.
Yeah, we'll start with Nate Landwehr versus Doo-Ho Choi because nobody cares about the washed Olympics between Smith and Reyes here. Before he left for his mandatory Korean military service, the Korean Superboy Doo-Ho Choi, 3 first-round knockouts, had a fight go to the 3rd round, totally fell apart. Leaves for service, comes back. Deep into the 2nd round, Charles Jourdain finishes him after Choi had knocked him down early. Fight after that, loses a decision, comes back, quick knockout over Bill Algeo. He's very aggressive too, much like Nate Landwehr. He just doesn't have the cardio or the durability or the toughness or the je ne sais quoi that Nate Landwehr brings to everything he does in life. So I am 100% rooting for Nate Landwehr. I want Nate Landwehr to win. I just want to get a better price on him after he gets hurt in the beginning because, as Nate says, whip my ass and see what happens. You know, if you don't beat him, he's probably going to win. These are all things that Nate Landwehr has actually said after fights. I'm very excited for it. I think Choi probably hurts him at some point early. I think Nate Landwehr is soaked in blood within the first 7 or 8 minutes of this fight, and then probably comes back and wins. So just look for the best price. You know, probably mid round 2 would actually be the spot, but do it after round 1 so you're not stressing yourself out. Yeah, Smith versus Reyes. Both guys look totally physically broken. Anthony Smith lost to a middleweight in a boring fight who took the fight on a week notice his last time out. Reyes, little sign of life, you know, he came out and knocked out Dustin Jacoby early, but under 2.5 at that price. It's minus 175, which I don't love, but I just don't see how someone doesn't get hurt here. I don't know who it is or how. If there's some grappling, Smith could easily submit him. If they're banging it out, something's going to break on somebody pretty fast. And then to your Kron point, absolutely love this fight. I'm so excited for it. It's either going to be the best grappling match in the UFC in a long time or the worst striking match in the UFC in a long time. And that is all up to Bryce Mitchell because Kron Gracie cannot wrestle and he cannot strike. He's going to try to jump guard. He has to open his feet to try to attack, and then you can just stand up if you want to. I don't know that Bryce Mitchell wants to. If anyone knows anything about Bryce Mitchell, he's not known for his like decision making or clear thinking or general, wise lifestyle.
Power
He
tool
might get in.
usage.
Yeah, yeah. Power drills also a problem. Yeah, so he might try to engage with Kron on the ground. I could actually see Crone winning a grappling heavy decision just with top pressure and stuff. So I took Crone. I think I got him at like plus 575. Linesman all over the place. This one's also notable because, as far as I know, this is the first time that two UFC fighters are facing off who both believe the earth is flat. So stay tuned for the post-fight promo. No matter who wins, it's going to be fun. I'm very much looking forward to this one. Hopefully somebody grapples, though, because if they choose to strike it out, it's going to be really ugly and boring.
This reminds me so much of the Paul Craig Bo Nickel fight
It's
from a few
it is
weeks
that
ago.
fight again, except with like much less smart people.
It's the same exact fight, with less skilled guys, but like Nickel, Bryce has the I win wrestling button whenever he wants it, provided he does not get submitted when he
Mhm.
wrestles. But otherwise, Bryce is likely to just stand and fight the ugliest striking fight you've ever seen, where Crone actually may land some volume and surprise some
Yeah.
people and make this like you're going to be watching it with the Bryce Mitchell ticket going. Did Crone edge that round? Why was that round like 60-40? Why was that round close? And you
Crone's
may see
probably
the
a
odds move
better
in.
striker than
Bright
Craig,
or
right?
Paul Craig lost all three rounds against Bo, even though it looked like they were competitive, but the price moved in. So keep an eye on that live
Yeah.
number. There's a chance that they fight ugly, competitive striking rounds that still go Bryce Mitchell's way because he has more power, but you may get a better live number on Bryce before he ever decides to wrestle. So keep an eye on that live number. That said, Bryce wrestling after winning striking and then immediately getting guillotined seems like a very likely outcome for the fight
Yeah.
IQ on either side of this matchup.
I
So
mean, Crone's going to try to jump guard at some point,
yeah,
and it's up to Bryce whether he wants to follow him down there or just politely ask him to join him for a terrible striking match again. And like seriously, I think any other featherweight on the roster, I'd go, of course they'll stand back up. Maybe not Bryce Mitchell though, right? Like he's the one guy that you can say, yeah, he might do the objectively wrong thing here.
let's close things out with our best bets, final bets potentially. I've
Final.
got a fight that I think is like a double best bet. But we're just gonna file it under final bets because it is two bets split into one. But basically, if you bet Vicente Luque at plus 136 and Themba Gorimbo Vicente Luque ends inside the distance at plus 117, I feel like you hit one of, if not both of those. The reason Luque is an underdog here is because his last fight ended so awkwardly. He was fighting Joaquin Buckley, relatively competitive in the first round. Second round just collapsed and got finished. And it was almost like he threw the fight. And he has a history of a brain bleed, which apparently doctors told him to stop fighting. I don't know why he's still fighting. I don't really love the idea of betting on a guy who has a brain bleed who looked like he collapsed in his last fight. That said, he's the way better fighter than Themba Gorimbo skill for skill. He's also been favored against far better competition than Themba Gorimbo. He was favored over Buckley. He was minus 150 against Buckley. He was minus 110 against Rafael dos Anjos, who he beat. He was minus 220 against Jeff Neal, and he was minus 200 over Bilal, the current champion. So now he's a dog to Themba Gorimbo over a moment that his last fight ended, but like one like very awkward moment where his last fight ended. We still don't really have an answer as to how it went down that way. So I think Luque being an underdog, absolutely you have to factor in completely shot as part of the equation, and completely shot as part of the equation. Why is the inside the distance line plus 117? On the other end, I think Gorimbo's gassy. I think Gorimbo's chinny. And I don't think Gorimbo is particularly skilled. I think he's still extremely raw. He's a good athlete. He's taller. He's longer. But Luque locking in a Darce here, hurting him on the feet and knocking him out, all significant possibilities if Luque is anything like his previous form. So you've got the Luque completely shot or Luque just being the far better, more skilled, more dangerous fighter with a finisher archetype to begin with. Luque at plus 136. Luque Gorimbo inside the distance at plus 117. Billy, any thoughts on that fight before we move on to your final bet?
I love that angle, and I wish I would have thought of that. Both Luque, and then you mentioned Randy Brown earlier, are guys that in my notes I put like these are underdogs that are better skilled fighters than their opponent, but really scary to bet on. Like I've lost so much money betting against Brian Battle to lose to people that he should lose to, and he somehow doesn't. And similarly, like Luque, if he looked remotely like he wanted to be there in his last fight, I would have been rushing to put that ticket in. But I'm nervous. But yeah, having the inside the distance, like half a unit on each of those, I think is really, really sharp. Um, Luque also somehow like a year younger than Themba Gorimbo, which blew my
Mm.
mind when I noticed that. Like I could have swore I watched Luque fight like when I was in high school, and I'm somehow older than Vicente Luque. Also, on a similar note, we have the biggest age gap in modern UFC history in Chase Hooper versus Clay Guida on this card. Clay Guida turns 43 Sunday, and Chase Hooper's 25. Massive favorite there. I kind of like Hooper by knockout at long odds just for fun, but figured I'd throw that one out there.
I also like Cooper by KO. Yeah,
Yeah, his
I'm with you
striking's
on
gotten a
that
lot
prop. That
better.
will be in my round robins, or I'll play that straight up. That's a good mention by you. Your best bet. You like Joshua Van at -150 against Cody Durden. I actually think Durden is going to win round one here. I think you're going to get a better live price on Van after round one. I like Vanderin in round two at +650 or round three at +1000. I think Durden is going to grapple. He's going to tire himself out, which he typically does. And I think he's going to get finished late after potentially leading. You like Van straight up. I'd imagine you also like him live after round one, too.
Yeah, wanted to have some kind of what felt like safer legs here and have a favorite on the betting card. I do like Josh Van. We saw him, he was doing fine against Charles Johnson until he got caught. Cody Durden's not catching you with a big punch. Like, you don't have to worry about that. Josh Van's 23 years old, more than a decade younger than Cody Durden. We see this a lot of times with these very exciting prospects where they look great and then they stumble once because the level of competition got higher, or they just didn't realize they could lose and somebody caught him with something. I think we're kind of through that phase with Josh Van. I think he's going to continue to look better and better every time we see him. Looked great against Edgar Chairez on kind of a short turnaround after the knockout, which worried me. But he looked great. I think Chairez is underrated. Chairez versus Durden would be a tough fight. And yeah, I just like the skill set, and we're projecting these guys' careers in different directions at this point. Cody Durden going to turn 34 pretty soon. Josh Van just turned 23. At flyweight, that's like being 5 or 6 years older, than a heavyweight of the same age. So slightly past the prime for Durden and approaching it for Van. So like him, I like the live stuff. I guess the only reason I'm not looking live is because if he defends takedowns in round one, it's kind of over from there.
Last two fights, I want to just get your brief thoughts on before we get out of here. Michael Chiesa seems like a very popular pick this week. He isn't about a pick 'em fight. He was an underdog, but fight is now around a pick 'em with Max Payne Griffin. Any thoughts for you on Chiesa Griffin? And then Chris Weidman likely retirement fight against Eric Anders rescheduled from the MSG card. I actually don't mind Weidman by decision at +180 there. Chiesa Griffin, I'm probably passing on. Any thoughts for you on either of those two fights?
Yeah, Chiesa's another one of those kind of like Luque where he probably should be favored here, just skill for skill, and I guess he's close to favored right now. But his only win in the last like 4 years was against Tony Ferguson, which makes it hard to bet. Max Griffin, challenging because both of his last two wins were split decisions. I thought he deserved one of those, not the other. 39, somehow 2 years older than Michael Chiesa, which also surprised me to learn
Mm.
this week. I'm staying away from it. I think if I had jumped on it early when you could get +135 or whatever on Chiesa, and then man, I just don't care about Eric Anders versus Chris Weidman. Like, it would have been cool to do it at MSG for Weidman's sake. I think the one angle I do see, they said Anders got sick. They said it wasn't weight cut related. He's a big old boy at 185. I don't know that I believe them. They're giving them the catch weight 195. Probably helps Anders here, so he's more likely to win than he was when it was 185 and he got sick. I don't know if that's likely enough to bet it. I don't have a strong desire to bet this one, so I'm kind of open to any suggestions you got if you have a strong read on it.
Yeah, I just have Weidman by decision of +130 versus +180 listed. I think that's interesting, but I actually didn't realize it's a catch weight as opposed to 185. That does help Anders. Anders tends to slow down. He's physically strong. He throws a lot of power into his techniques. If he doesn't have to cut as much weight, that does help him a little bit. I still think Weidman gets the takedowns and eventually, wins the decision, control-based decision. But that neutralizes the cardio a little bit, extra 10 pounds, and also makes him more difficult to take down. So, yeah, nothing significant for me on that fight. Like I
If
said,
either
likely
of them
staying away from
got,
Kissing Griffin. Go ahead, Billy.
I was if either of them got to plus money, which they've both flirted with at different points, either of them, Weidman, Anders, I don't care. I'd probably take it. Haven't quite got there. The best right now is minus 104 on Anders. There's some name recognition on Weidman, so if that skews the line Saturday afternoon, maybe, but I'm not rushing to the proverbial counter to get that bet in.
Well, that'll do it for our UFC betting preview. You can find more of our UFC content from both Billy and myself on actionnetwork.com. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Action Pro. You can access our projections and receive quicker bet notifications from our action experts. Use promo code POD20 to get $20 off of your annual subscription. Best of luck with your bets this weekend. Enjoy the violence. We'll be back here next week for UFC Tampa, the final UFC card of 2024. Hope you enjoy the fights. We'll see you next time.